when you combine some of these ideological kind of deep-seated beliefs with money, with everybody wants to pump their own bags and wants their investments to go up, it just gets quite nasty. But in the meantime, the real enemy is the powers that be that we're trying to disintermediate. The governments that inflate money so they can build more bombs to drop on innocent people, or do all sorts of other awful things that nation states do. This is the true this is the true force that we want to disintermediate. And
just to add to that, the forces that we're trying to disintermediate are also like the financial institutions that charge Africans 85% interest on a loan of $100 just because they're poor and they're not sure that they will get it. They're the people that are, financing war, doing deals with drug cartels. Like, yeah, you're right. Like the Bitcoin community, if you're an Ethereum, is not the enemy, and even the BCH or the BSV community is not the enemy. Like they're different shades of sort of the same thing. And I think Vitalik put it really well when he said that having the tribalism in crypto was like having the PC versus Mac wars again, just if every computer had some company stuck inside of it.
Yeah, that was a perfect analogy, because it just is so fitting for what's going on. And another thing is, like, you start to see like people call themselves very principled. You see, historically Bitcoiners have been very libertarian, and they don't want the state intervening with things. But then you've seen various instances of these so-called freedom maximalists, people that really value liberty, coming out and sort of saying, well, Ethereum should have been a security, and they should regulate stable coins. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought you were principled. So you kind of see over time, there are people that really truly do care about these things, and then there's people that are more so just waving that ideological flag, or wanting their investments to go up. I think a perfect example of being really consistent with values is Zuko with Zcash. The reason I mention that is it was very striking to me to see somebody who was very committed to the idea of preserving privacy, and then Zcash was built around that idea. However, once Ethereum started to get the ability to add in privacy preserving tech via maybe hooks into Zcash or using that technology, Zuko and a lot of that team was 100% behind that. So rather than just say, well, wait, that's not built in our ecosystem, we can't handle that. It's like, okay, this actually pushes progress forward with respect to privacy. Therefore, that's great. And I wish a lot more actors in the ecosystem were like that. People in the Monero space, some of them are actually quite the opposite, where they just shit all over Zcash and anything that's not Monero. And it's like, wait a minute, you're really on the same team here. You want to preserve financial privacy. Maybe you don't. Maybe you think the methods aren't great, but again, it's just that there's a certain kind of person that's drawn to the tribalism, and it gets amplified on Twitter, and it's tiring, it's bullshit, and it ultimately, I think it just does a disservice to the progress of crypto.
And it does so much, because in the end of the day, the more you think about it, the more correlated we all are. Like, if one thing happens on one side of the blockchain sphere, particularly in Bitcoin, of course, because it's just like the way things are currently, it ripples through to everything that we do. And there was a very interesting thing that happened back in the Ethereum classic days, like the DAO hack days, where this thing occasioned the creation of Ethereum Classic and the division, and you could see sort of like the more libertarian Bitcoin maximalist types flocking towards ETC and ETH, like remaining this separate thing that some would call a shitcoin just because it had a pre-mine, because it had an ICO, etc. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you see any way to reasoning with these communities, particularly in Ethereum's case, or is it just a lost case that is we can never convince like Bitcoin maximalists that Ethereum's good for the space?
I mean, certain Bitcoin maxis are, they're sort of maybe a lost cause. Although you have seen people kind of go from a more rigid Bitcoin stance to becoming more open-minded.
Well,
Sailor
Eric from Shapeshift is a great example, right? He was a bit of a maximalist back in the day.
Sure. Yeah, he was. Back when there was really kind of only Bitcoin and a few other ones. Maybe Litecoin was very early on. Yeah, he kind of thought, okay, well, Bitcoin is the only game in town. But I think once he saw value in some other coins like Litecoin, and then of course with Ethereum, it's like if you just rationally look at it and you don't take that tribalist perspective, you can see that other projects can add value as well, and suddenly you're not such a maximalist. I think one thing, because you ask a really good question, is like what can be done about this. I think so. When I talk about the evils of tribalism, I'm not saying that there's not room for healthy debate around things. There are like very good arguments for and against different implementations of this type of technology, and we're all just making this up as we go along. So it's very important to have open discourse and open debates, but part of it is just like, let's be cool to each other. Like, you see some of these people, they get so they're so aggressive and so just like, the cliche is toxic, but they are. And I think that really sells online. Some people love that stuff, like, oh, like he's such a toxic dick, and people are drawn to that, some people. But it's like, what if we all just kind of took the approach of like I would say a lot of these maximalists, if they were sitting in a bar with you, they would have a nice rational conversation. It really helps them sell their brand by being toxic online. But part of it is just to have like rational, nice debates about things. This is one thing where Ethereum has been really good, is over the course of the Ethereum journey, there's been a lot of interesting debates and discussions about how to handle all variety of things, whether it was going back to the DAO hack or the parity multi-sig hack, or like the merits of 1559 and things like that. But people, for the most part, have always been really just kind of very academic and very and not so emotional with debates. And I think communities should approach each other in that way. Also just pulling back and zooming out and seeing the big picture, and also recognizing that increasingly blockchains do not live on an island of their own. There's more and more bridges being built in a increasingly trust minimized fashion from one blockchain to another. Thorchain is a perfect example. Now users can go to Shapeshift and use Thorchain to move from, say, Bitcoin to ETH, or from two different chains without having to rely on a centralized third party, and that's a huge win. Cosmos is another example. You can do some interesting things in Cosmos on these zones because they're more scalable and they have faster finality. But now with the advent of the Gravity bridge over to ETH, you can actually have you can kind of have the best of both worlds. Just really quick, I want to give one example of that. There's an app called Sommelier. Zaki and Jack Zamplin, two guys in the Cosmos ecosystem, have built this, and it's a way where you can manage impermanent loss on Uniswap. But to make that happen, you're utilizing the benefits of Cosmos's scalability and fast finality. So we're just starting to see like how these building blocks can plug into each other. And I'm a very, very firm believer that the crypto over the long run is not a zero-sum game, but a positive-sum game. And that zero-sum fallacy, once you just look at where things are headed and you cast that aside, you start to see the big picture.
I'm very interested in the way tribalism gets sort of injected into the ecosystem, because, for example, I know I bring this up a lot, and this goes more for my friends watching this than to the people watching this. I try to keep this thinking away from the channel, but I have a love-hate relationship with Cardano and with Charles Hoskinson himself. Not because I don't think they're doing good things, not because I think he's not a great member of the ecosystem, but just because every time he gets a chance, his selling point is to compare Cardano to Ethereum. And I'm sure because they have a very academic approach to doing things, and they're very scientific, and they really like honest, open, constructive debate. But every time he gets just talking about Ethereum and how they're different or better than Ethereum, because that's pretty much most of what they do, talk about how they're better than Ethereum in the way they perceive things. I honestly think even if you're doing it in a good way or in a positive way, there is no way that doesn't that doesn't filter down the ecosystem and become tribalism down the line. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when platforms position themselves as ETH killers, that does them a big disservice. We saw an interesting contrast to that with Cosmos. I think is like, Cosmos is just in terms of like on a per zone basis is far more scalable than Ethereum layer 1, and there's also this idea of connecting these different blockchains, and that's interesting. But there is never that kind of hyperbolic vitriol against Ethereum. There's never this like, we're here to eat their lunch. And that makes a big difference because you really push people away. You make people on guard against that technology. With Cardano, I think, a lot of it goes back probably with the history of Charles, who used to be with the EF in the very early days. And, there's just all of that. I haven't really listened to much Cardano stuff lately. I do know that they, a lot of people, a lot of advocates of ADA and Cardano, pushing the investment on Twitter, love to, kind of perpetuate this. You're really seeing this now with Solana. They're trying to position themselves and shift the narrative into this idea of like, well, maybe a little bit of centralization is okay to meet the needs of like, the scalable crypto world. But, at the end of the day, it's like, on one hand, I think it's telling that everybody wants to compare themselves with Ethereum. That really is where most of the action is happening now. And, people in other platforms, they have this idea that maybe we could be the one that really kind of takes over. Again, I think that's short-sighted. Everything can work together. Decentralization is a sliding scale. Not everything needs to be super centralized. So, maybe there's a use case for things that aren't as decentralized. With respect to Cardano, these comparisons seem kind of silly to me because, their smart contract functionality isn't live yet. People will call them vaporware.
Yeah, like I saw the vaporware. Sorry, I saw the vaporware thing in your article. I thought it was very funny. I never seen that.
Yeah, people like to say, well, what's been delivered. But the fact is they're doing some interesting things from a UTXO kind of paradigm, and I think it really is good, like the academic rigor that they apply there. But on the same token, pardon the pun, it just doesn't do you any favors to just always position yourself in such an antithetical way. Like these things will be able to plug in with each other, and the sooner we can just get away from that tribalist thinking, the more we can really see the big picture and start to figure out how these various technologies can meet the needs of the entire world, which will eventually be adopting crypto.
And that's sort of like if, I don't know, Samsung, okay, I'm going to go to an easier example. It's sort of like if Pepsi positioned itself as a Coca-Cola killer, like it really tells you a lot, right?
Exactly. It's like you're just, aiming for that top brand or whatever. The good thing is, like, I feel like in Ethereum, that's been these criticisms have really sort of lit a fire under the asses of all the builders. Like, for example, with layer 2 and down the road eventually with the sharding paradigm. But you know, like one of the best things you can do when you see these criticisms is just sit back and be like, okay, how much validity is there? One thing a lot of people will do, especially online, is make overly broad statements. You've seen this with Bitcoiners, for example. They'll say Ethereum can't scale.